The low hum was not truly a sound, but a pervasive resonance that vibrated through the very marrow of Dr. Aris Thorne's bones, a frequency that predated human understanding and seemed to emanate from the living bedrock of the Swiss Alps itself. It was 2067, and he stood within the chambers of the Elsewhere machine, a place where geometry's twisted perception and light bent around unseen folds in space. This was no crude itm. This was the culmination of 7 centuries of the Order of the Liminal Threshold's work, a synthesis of quantum mechanics and hermetic principles, of particle physics and ancient wisdom. The machine itself was a testament to impossible engineering, or perhaps, impossible growth. At its heart, a massive obsidian sphere hung, suspended within interlocking rings of metals that defied any known periodic table. Aris traced the shimmering lines of crystalline matrices with his gaze, watching them pulse with bioluminescent patterns that unsettlingly mirrored the intricate moral pathways of his own consciousness. Arrays of copper and silver conductors traced sigils across surfaces that seemed to extend beyond three-dimensional space, hinting at the true nature of the apparatus. It breathed, not with the whir of machinery, but with an organic rhythm, as if it had been summoned through calculations that bridged the mathematical and the mystical. He closed his eyes, focusing on the consciousness resonance chamber, its purpose clear in his mind even as its mechanism remained shrouded in the machine's esoteric nature. This was where human awareness was calibrated, where the subtlest shifts in his inner landscape would align him with specific vibrational frequencies existing in the liminal spaces between quantum states. The machine recognized what the ancients called the Akashic field, the underlying substrate of information that permeated all reality, accessible only to consciousness properly attuned through a fusion of meditation and quantum field manipulation. Aris felt a subtle shift, a loosening of his perceptual anchors as his mind prepared to navigate realms where the dimensional barriers were not walls, but permeable membranes. The hermetic processors hummed a distinct, deeper note as they calculated the precise frequencies required for his passage. These weren't silicon chips. Their logic gates were arranged in patterns echoing the sacred geometry of Gothic cathedrals and ancient stone circles, their algorithms drawn from medieval grimoires. He visualized the 17 different probability matrices being simultaneously processed, their outputs converted into electromagnetic patterns designed to resonate directly with his pineal gland, the biological interface between his mind and the quantum foam. A warmth spread behind his eyes, a gentle pressure that signaled the imminent translation of abstract mathematics into raw, sensory input. His consciousness began to stretch, a sensation akin to an elastic band being drawn taut, not painful, but profoundly disorienting. The crystalline structures of the philosopher's resonators, grown in zero gravity and exposed to specific planetary gravitational fields, seemed to hum in harmony with the growing expansion of his awareness. He felt them channeling the astral light, the medium through which consciousness transcended dimensional boundaries, a soft, luminous current washing over him. The mercury processors, containing not common metal but the alchemical mercury of the ancients, a substance in perpetual transition between matter and energy, pulsated in sync with his bioelectric field, translating the machine's mathematical outputs into what could only be described as applied metaphysics. He wasn't just observing a change. He was participating in the manipulation of reality itself, his conscious intention backed by a nascent understanding of universal laws governing existence across all dimensions. The consciousness calibration had been a long and arduous process, years spent in meditation derived from Tibetan dream yoga, combined with electromagnetic stimulation of specific moral pathways. Now, it wasn't about mechanical controls. It was about intentional resonance. Aris held the desired destination firmly in his mind, not as a coordinate, but as a vibrational pattern, a resonance signature that encapsulated specific physical laws, historical trajectories, and collective consciousness states. He had trained for months in dimensional perception, learning to perceive the probability shadows of parallel worlds without losing coherence in his current reality. Now, those shadows began to solidify. The world around him dissolved, not into darkness, but into a kaleidoscope of impossible colors that had no names in his primary dimension. He felt his individual identity fragment, not disintegrating, but expanding, merging with the quantum field itself, a profound and exhilarating dissolution that defied the very concept of self. He was no longer just Aris Thorne. He was a resonant frequency within a stir, and bounded awareness, a fleeting wave in an ocean of probabilities. Sounds emerged from the vibration of probability itself, a complex symphony of shifting realities that layered over each other, creating harmonies and dissonances that both soothed and stimulated. The geometries of the machine's inner spaces, and the interdimensional topology it mapped, were not linear or planar. Chambers extended beyond three-dimensional space, their forms twisting and reforming as he perceived them. Corridors looped back on themselves through higher dimensions, and observation platforms seemed to exist simultaneously in multiple realities, presenting impossible vistas that defied the very notion of a single viewpoint. His senses, already stretched, began to register a new form of perception, a synesthesia of interdimensional perception, where the abstract mathematics of dimensional transition became tangible, perceived as flavors that had no culinary equivalent, and textures that pulsed with light and sound. The machine revealed the multiverse not as a simple branching tree, but as a vast hyperspatial mandala. Dimensions existed in nested hierarchies of meaning and significance, each reality a complex intersection of multiple probability streams, their stability determined by the coherence of the consciousness observing them. Aris felt a subtle pull of these intersections, charted by the machine's topology mapers using principles derived from both non-Euclidean geometry and ancient systems of correspondences. He was traversing a living, breathing cosmic structure, where his own consciousness was both observer and, infinitesimally, a co-creator. Through it all, he sensed the distant, comforting presence of the Threshold Guardians. Their neural pathways, restructured through moral feedback and alchemical processes, allowed them to interface directly with the machine's quantum consciousness. They existed in a state of perpetual liminality, their awareness spanning multiple realities simultaneously, their consciousness serving as living bridges between dimensions. Though no longer entirely human, their enhanced perception was a vital safeguard, monitoring the stability of dimensional barriers and preventing the catastrophic cascade failures that threatened the multiverse's integrity. He was a traveler, but they were the navigators, existing within the very heart of the liminal. In this state of profound connection, the metaphysical implications washed over him, not as intellectual concepts, but as undeniable truths. If his consciousness could exist independently of its dimensional origin, what did this mean for the ephemeral concepts of identity and mortality? The boundaries of Aris Thorn blurred, replaced by a sense of belonging to an infinite, interconnected fabric of existence. The machine wasn't just a transport. It was a revealer, demonstrating the underlying unity that connected all possible realities. The ancient principle of as above, so below resonated with visceral clarity. The microcosm of his own consciousness was a mirror to the macrocosm of the multiverse's architecture, a direct correspondence that dissolved the perceived separation between himself and the boundless cosmos. The journey was not to a destination, but into the very nature of existence itself, a fluid, ever-shifting landscape where science and mysticism were indistinguishable, and the impossible was simply another facet of reality.